This we pray in Jesus' name. And everyone said, amen. Go ahead and plop on down, grab your Bibles, and open up to the Gospel of Mark chapter 5. The Gospel of Mark chapter 5. Jesus and his disciples found themselves in the land of the Gadarenes. The land of the Gadarenes, yes. It was a land that was on the other side of the Jordan. There we go. It was on the other side of the Jordan. The Jordan being this river running up and down right here. This would all be the land of Israel. This was not. It was an area called Decapolis. And they were in the land of the Gadarenes. See, they had just crossed over the Sea of Galilee. You know the story. How when they were going over the sea, the storm whipped up. The waves were crashing. The wind was blowing. The disciples were fearing, and Jesus was sleeping. And they wake him up, Lord, Lord, do you not care? And he told the winds, hush, and they all calmed down. And he says, you have little faith. And they land on the other side of the Sea of Galilee in the land of the Gadarenes. Now, this was an unclean place. It was not Jewish territory. And we read there in the text that it was actually a cemetery where they were at. Now, for a Jewish man, for Jewish individuals, that is considered an unclean place, unkosher. You don't go there, you don't hang out there. But there they found themselves in the midst of a cemetery. And we'll read that they were surrounded by this herd of pigs. Pigs also being unclean, unkosher. Jews were to have nothing to do with them, not to eat them, not to touch them, much less to herd them. It was an unclean place. It was an unsafe place. Because there, living amongst the tomb, was a demoniac. A man who was possessed by many demons. They called him Legion. And he was there living amongst the tombs, bloody, scratching his skin, untamable by any man. And that's where we pick up the story here in Mark chapter 5, verse 1. It says, they came to the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gadarenes. Again, take note where they are. They're there in the land of the Gadarenes, where there's pigs and this madman, Jesus and his disciples. And it says, and when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. And he had been dwelling amongst the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. And no one was strong enough to subdue him. And constantly, verse 5, day and night he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, gashing himself with stones. Imagine with me. This madman with fire in his eyes, chains hanging from his wrists, bloody, crying, screeching, stabbing himself, living amongst the tombs. I mean, a gross scene indeed. Untamable, unstoppable, terrifying. Verse 6, and seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. Mind you, he wasn't bowing down in worship. It wasn't because of his love and heart for Jesus, but rather the demons that inhabited within him recognized that this was God incarnate. And they had to pay homage. Even though they're demons, when they are in the presence of the Lord, they too have to pay homage. And they're not bowing from the heart, but because they have to. Verse 7, and shouting with a loud voice, he says, what business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High? What do you want with me? I'll tell you what he wants. Jesus wants the man back. This man that has been possessed, taken over by these demons. Jesus wants the man back. He says, I implore you by God, do not torment me. For he, Jesus, had been saying to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And Jesus was asking him, what is your name? And he, the demon, said to him, my name is Legion, for we are many. Now that name Legion is a military term. Now it could be that this man at one time was a soldier or a military leader of some sort who maybe had been serving the Romans in some capacity and therefore got introduced into the occult, had been seduced by some satanic influences, and as a result was filled with a legion of demons. Some people speculate that might be the case. But how many is a legion? Well, a legion is a military term for 6,000 men. That's a lot of demons. And he was powerful, but he was pitiful, and it was putrid. It was impossible for any man to tame or control this individual. So not knowing what to do with him, the people just kind of pushed him out into the outskirts to go live in this cemetery so they would have nothing to do with him. And then he confronts Jesus, and verse 10 says, and he, the demon, began to implore him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Out of the country of the Gadarenes. Remember that. This is essential, germane to our story. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on a mountain. And the demons implored him, saying, send us into the swine so that we may enter them. Send us, cast us into the pigs, they say. Interesting to these demons, pig or people makes no difference to them. They just don't want to be disembodied. So send us into the swine, send us into the pigs. It's all the same to us because you see, the devil makes people into pigs ultimately. The devil wants to make people like you and me into pigs. That is obsessed with ourselves, focused on ourselves, all about ourselves, feeding our flesh, porking out. That's what the devil wants to do to us and in us. Make pigs out of you and me, you see? Send us into the pigs. And Jesus says, okay. Verse 13. And Jesus gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine. And believe it or not, this is the origin of deviled ham. That was a joke. Okay, thank you. So these pigs were filled with demons, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 pigs. And they were drowned in the Sea of Galilee. And that is the origin of Swine Lake. You guys are a hard crowd to please, let me tell you. Anyhow, verse 14, their herd ran away. And these jokes aren't going to work in Spanish, by the way. So if it didn't float here, I'm doomed, okay? There's no jokes in my sermon. Okay, so verse 14, their herd ran away and reported it in the city. And the herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and in the country. So the guys that were taking care of these pigs, that the demons possessed, and then ran down the embankment and drowned themselves in the sea. These herdsmen said, well, we don't want to be held responsible for losing these 2,000 pigs, for the death of these 2,000 swine. So they went to the city to report what has happened in order for them not to be held culpable. And the people came to see what it was that had happened, verse 15. And they came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed. He was sitting down, clothed, and in his right mind. The very man who had had the legion. And they, the people, became frightened. The guy who was possessed, who was hurting themselves, bludgeoning himself, terrorizing the community, is now sitting in his right mind, fully clothed. And rather than rejoicing, rather than celebrating, they become frightened. Verse 16, those who had seen it described to them how it had happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the swine. And the people began to implore him, Jesus, to what? To leave their region. Leave, they said. Please leave. You're bad for business. I mean, we had all this money invested in these 6,000 swine. And you come along and you kill our whole industry in one day. Leave. We don't understand what's happened to this man. We don't understand what's occurred in his life. So please leave. Who's asking Jesus to leave? The men of Gadara. Again, remember that, Gadara. Now, Jesus won't stay where he's not wanted. So, verse 18, as he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. Let me come with you, Jesus. And Jesus, did not let him. But he said to him, go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. And he went away and began proclaiming in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. Now, I'm sure you've read this story many a time. But as I read it, there's certain things here that strike me a little odd, a little off. First of all, why was there on the edge of the Sea of Galilee, on the border of Israel, a pig industry? A herd of swine. After all, for the Jewish people, swine, pig, pork was unclean, unkosher. Not allowed to be part of their diet. No sausage or ham with the eggs. None of that. Pigs were forbidden by God for the Jewish people to eat. I don't know what's going on. For the Jewish people to eat or to be around or to touch. They were unclean, unkosher, forbidden. So what are these pigs doing there in the land of Gadara? Why does this man go to Decapolis? Those were 10 cities that were in this region. Decapolis is a Greek term, a Greek name. And as I pointed out, it was over here, my little pointer, on the other side of the Jordan, right on the border of Israel. And it consisted of 10 cities. 10 cities that were made up of Jewish descendants, but yet they were Greek in culture. They had worshiped Greek idols. They followed Greek philosophy. These cities, including Gadara, were economically prosperous. They were spiritually dark and damnable. But he says, go back to Decapolis. And why do the people mourn more for the loss of pigs than they do rejoice for the liberation and salvation of this man? Rather than rejoicing, a man has been freed of this torment, they lament the loss of their money. You're bad for business. Go away. So Jesus did. So what's going on here, Greg? Well, why are these cities called Decapolis? What's happened to these Jewish societies that they've turned into these Greek pleasure centers? How did these Jewish groups become so paganized to where they're swine, unclean, unkosher animals everywhere? How did these Jews get involved in these pagan practices? What's happened? To get the answer here, we have to go back to the book of Numbers. So stick a piece of paper, a pen, or something here in Mark 5, and go back with me to the book of Numbers chapter 32. Now, the book of Numbers is precisely about that. It is about the numbering of the people of Israel. This is a book that was written by Moses after their exodus from Egypt as they go to the promised land. And the Lord tells him, I want you to count the people. And 2 times in the book, we see this counting occurring. God makes them give an account for their lives. And God wants their lives to count. That's why the book of Numbers has so much application for you and for me. That's why this book deals with issues that can be difficult to hear, hurtful, maybe even jarring. But you see, it's okay. Because God wants our life to count. So I need sometimes to be confronted, to be jarred, to be shaken. So here, the children of Israel, when this book was written, Numbers, they were still in the wilderness, on their way, about to enter into the promised land. That was the land that God promised them, where they would go and it would be theirs, and they would prosper and they would flourish. The land that he said is your inheritance, Israel. But you have to take it. You have to possess it. I'm not just handing it to you. I'll give the victory to you, but you have to go in and fight for it. So God, before he sends them in, is preparing them, getting them ready to move into that life. He's preparing them, just like he does to you and to me, by the way. Because God knows our tendency. All of us have this tendency to want to just cruise through life, right? Cruise down the highway of life, comfortable, getting into our little routine. But be warned, that can be disastrous. Back in the early 70s, when I was a little guy, a new feature came out on the cars of that day. It was something called cruise control. You know what I'm talking about, where you get to press a little button and it'll hold down the accelerator, and that way you can take your foot off and kind of relax as you drive. Well, this was something brand new in the 70s. And this couple, who had worked hard all their lives and finally had retired, had saved up their money in order to buy themselves a Winnebago, one of those big old RVs. They were going to go see the country. They bought their Winnebago, but when they were shopping, the salesman explained to them, this Winnebago, this RV has a new feature, the latest in technology. It's called cruise control. Oh, what's that? They asked. Well, all you do, you get on the highway, you press this button, and it drives itself. Oh. They're so excited. They buy their Winnebago, they pack it up. They set out on their first little excursion. They get up onto the freeway. The man presses the little button, takes his foot off the accelerator, and sure enough, it's driving himself. And he says, great, this is grand. And he gets up to go make himself a cup of coffee and back. Needless to say, they crashed. The Winnebago was destroyed, but thankfully their lives were spared. But the point is, we sometimes do that in our lives. We get cozy. We get comfortable. We get habitual. Where we just set our lives, click on cruise control. And we think, oh, it'll just carry on its own. I'll just cruise on down the freeway of life. But it's always to great detriment. God doesn't want you and me to put our lives on cruise control, gang. He says, hey, I know you've been walking with me for a long time. But there's new territory to move into, new ground to explore and experience. There's more I want you to enjoy in your Christian walk, in your Christian life. I have more for you. So you need to be alert. You need to be awake in order for you to be able to take what I have promised you. Don't put yourself on cruise control. Don't set yourself on automatic pilot. But be engaged. Be alert. And that's what he wanted for the children of Israel. They were entering in to take the promised land, the land of blessing, the land that flows with milk and honey. When the spies went in, they came back with great big old fruit. It says it took 2 men to carry 1 cluster of grapes. Oh, it was abundant. Oh, it was grand. It's truly a blessed land, they came back, but it's inhabited by giants. There's giants in the land. So what did that first generation do? They said, let's go back to Egypt. There's too much opposition. They're too big. They're too great for us. We know that God has promised it to us, but no, we can't do it. And God said, then you will wander in the wilderness for 40 years until the last of that generation dies, so the next generation can come in. And the New Testament says that this is a picture. It's what we call a type in biblical studies. It's a picture of the Christian life. That God wants us all to enter into this land of promise, this land of abundance, this life of abundance that he has for us. He says, I have come that you might have life and have it what? Abundantly. He says, I have for you great things, a life that flows with milk and honey, a life filled with great big old spiritual fruit and blessing. I have this promise for you, but you have to enter in and possess it. There will be opposition. There will be trepidation. There will be difficulty, but I am with you. And I will give you victory. But you have to enter in. You have to cross over the Jordan, he told Joshua and the people of Israel. You got to cross over the Jordan and take the land. And he tells you and me we have to cross over our Jordan. To take that land of abundance, he wants each of us to enjoy. Not that we set our lives on cruise control, but that we be engaged and we enjoy that life of abundance he has for each and every one of us. That's the picture. That's the type. So here in the book of Numbers, we see now the first generation has died. It is now the second generation, and it's time to go in and take the land. Numbers 32, verse 1. It says, now the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad, notice that, Gad. Jesus and the disciples were in the land of the Gadarenes. Gadarenes. It all ties in here, okay? So watch this. Now the sons of Reuben and the sons of Gad had an exceedingly large number of livestock, horses and cows and whatnot. So when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that it was indeed a place suitable for livestock, the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben came and spoke to Moses and to Eleazar the priest and to the leaders of the congregation, saying, Ataroth, Dibon, Jazer, Nimrah, Hashbon, Elilah, Sebon, Nebo, and Boan. The land which the Lord conquered before the congregation of Israel is a land for livestock, and your servants have livestock. They said, we have found favor in your sight. Let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Do not take us across the Jordan. So the people of Israel, evidently, as they were coming up from Egypt, they were right in this area, about ready to cross over the Jordan to take the land that God had promised them. They're right here in that region of Gadara. And the descendants of Reuben, the descendants of Gad, who had all these livestock, all these cows, said, this land is perfect for us. Don't make us cross over. Don't make us obey the commands of God. Give this land to us. This is perfect for our livestock, perfect for our future, perfect for our investments. Give this land to us as a possession. That word possession is the word inheritance. Why is that important? Because God said you will cross over the Jordan to the land of your inheritance. But they said, we don't want the inheritance that God has for us. We want this land on the other side of the Jordan to be our inheritance. Again, the promised land depicts the abundant life Christ wants all of us to enjoy. A land that flows with milk and honey. A land that is filled with all kinds of fruit and blessing and abundance. Yes, there are giants in the land. There is opposition as we try to enter into this abundant life. But God is with us and promises us to give us the victory if we obey him. If we obey him, we follow him, we will enter into this abundant life he wants for us. But we have to cross over the Jordan. We have to leave the wilderness of carnality, the wilderness of mediocrity, the wilderness of aimlessness and meaninglessness, and cross over the Jordan in order to enter into our inheritance. And that's the problem here. The tribes of Reuben and Gad said, no, Mo. We're happy here. We're happy just hanging out on the borders. On the border of your blessing, the border of your promise. Look at all the cattle we have. This land is perfect for us. It will be good for our business. It was good for business, but it was a big mistake. We don't want to cross over. We don't want that. What God has promised us, we don't want that. We want to stay here. We're comfortable here. There's no giants here. We want to stay here. And that's the danger for you and me. To get comfortable and say, I don't want to press in. I don't want to push forward. There's too much opposition in that lifestyle to live for the Lord. I'm happy just kind of hanging out on the fringes, coming to church on Sunday, not being completely committed and not letting anybody know at school, at work, or anywhere that I'm a believer in Christ. I'll do my Sunday thing and then the rest of the week I'll do my thing. Not being sold out, that's too radical, and there's too many problems and too many hassles and too much opposition. No, I'm better off just hanging out on the fringes. And that's what Gad did. They didn't enter into the promised land. And that's why the land is called Gadara, after the name of Gad, the land of the Gadarenes. But hear me, God wants us to press in, to press on, to move ahead. We cannot stay in the same place spiritually day after day after day. Hear me well. You're either going forward or you're sliding back. But you cannot stay in the same place spiritually. So these guys, verse 5, they said, if we have found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants as a possession. Let this be our inheritance. Do not take us across the Jordan. We don't want to go deeper. We don't want to press on. We want to stay here where it's comfortable. And Moses gets mad. But Moses said to the sons of Gad and to the sons of Reuben, shall your brothers go to war? Shall they press in? Shall they sacrifice? Are they going to be moving forward while you yourselves sit here? Are you going to allow your brothers to go to battle while you sit here in comfort? Now, why are you discouraging the sons of Israel from crossing over into the land which the Lord has given them? By you not obeying, you're discouraging others. When I say I'm not going to press in, I want to stay in my little comfort zone. I know I can go deeper. I know I can go further. But, at this point in my life, I have parties to go to, people to hang out with. I got money to make, a business to start. I got things to do. I don't have time to press in or go forward. But he's saying, watch out, because understand, people are watching you. You who have been Christians for 10 years, you have people who are younger in the Lord looking at you saying, well, what do you do? And you refusing to press in, to move forward, to grab hold of everything that God has intended for you and promised to you, you're discouraging them. They see you hanging out on the fringes and they think, well, that's what we're all supposed to do. That's what Moses chastises Reuben and Gad. What are you guys doing? Verse 8. This is what your forefathers did when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. This is what the guys that came out of Egypt did, refusing to come in and take possession of the land. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol and saw the land, they discouraged the sons of Israel so that they did not go into the land which the Lord had given them. You're just like your forefathers, Moses says, who refused to enter the land after sending in the spies, even though they saw the abundance of fruit, the blessedness of the land. But the giants that challenged there, they didn't want to get involved with them. You're just like them. You're just like them. And you know what? Young people, we can do the same thing. We can criticize the older generation, our parents' generation, for their lack of zeal, for playing church. But what about you? What about me? Are you pressing in? Are you crossing over? Are you expending the energy? Or are you finding the excuses? Moses is saying to Gad, you're discouraging the next generation because you're more preoccupied about your cattle than about pressing in, about obeying the Lord. You're more worried about your portfolio than you are about your obedience. You're just like the generation that ended up wandering in the desert. Wandering. See, they could have entered into the land. They could have taken possession and enjoyed the abundance, but they spent 40 years wandering in circles, the Bible says, in the desert. No direction, no fruit, no blessing, just going around in circles until the last of, that was what their lives were like. And that's what it's like for us spiritually when we refuse to press in. There's no direction, there's no meaning, and there's no fruit. It's just dry desert. Like, this is the Christian life? No, it's not. We're to press in, go forward, possess everything, all the promises, all the blessings that God has in store for us. Verse 14. Now behold, you have risen up in your father's place, a brood of sinful men, to add still more to the burning anger of the Lord against Israel. For if you turn away from following him, he will once more abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy all these people. You're a perverse generation like your fathers were, he says, who under Moses refused to enter the land because you're worried about your cows. You guys are blowing it, he says. Verse 16. Then they came to him and said, we will build here sheepfolds for our livestock and cities for our little ones. But we ourselves will be armed, ready to go before the sons of Israel until we have brought them into their place, while our little ones live in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes until every one of the sons of Israel has possessed his inheritance. So they say, okay. We'll compromise here. We'll go. We're going to leave our families, our children, our wives behind, but we'll go and fight for them. They thought they were doing them a favor. But in reality, they're robbing their kids of the opportunity of seeing their fathers obey the Lord. Our kids need to see mom and dad engaged in battle, taking new territory. But they were robbing these kids. And as a result, we're going to see under these kids, these cattle, these sheep are going to turn into pigs. See, it would have been better if they'd gone to war. But because of their compromise, refusing to obey, wanting to stay on the fringes, it just led to another compromise and to another one and to another one, and they will go from herding sheep to herding pigs. So Moses says, verse 20, so Moses said to them, if you do this, if you will arm yourselves before the Lord for the war, and all your armed men cross over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven his enemies out from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, then afterwards you shall return and be free of obligation toward the Lord and toward Israel, and this land shall be yours for possession before the Lord. This isn't God saying, okay, your request is fine with me. He's just saying, that's all you want. Okay. See, God will never take me further in my spiritual life. He will never take me further than I want to go. He will never force me to go deeper, to go further, to press in. But, he says, verse 23, if you will not do so, behold, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. Moses says to Reuben and Gad, if this is what you want, fine. But if you don't live up to the agreement, which is second best, by the way, what you want is second best, but if you don't live up to it, then your sin will find you out. It doesn't say that God's going to hunt them down and shoot them. It says you're going to pay the consequences. Sin will hunt you down and get you. See, sometimes we think the consequences of our sin is something that God has sent against us. No. Every sin has its consequences, and it's not God sending them, it's the sin itself that brought them. Paul says, don't be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, this he will reap. So if you're sowing seeds to the flesh, you're going to produce fruit that's going to hurt you. Every sin I do will find me out. And God's not saying I'm going to reveal it to embarrass you. But sin will dog you till the day it catches you. And be sure of this, whatever sin involved, sin will find you out and track you down. And it's a spiritual law. Every time. It will track me down, find me out, humiliate me, embarrass me, debase me. So that ought to give me pause every time I'm tempted to compromise. I'm tempted not to obey the Lord. I'm tempted to say, well, I'm not going to cross over the Jordan. I'm not going to press in. The Lord says, I want to spare you that humiliation and that pain. That's what Moses is telling these lukewarm followers. And so it happened. What do you mean? Well, just as we read at the beginning of our study, when Jesus comes to the land of the Gadarenes, the land of Gad, all of a sudden it's a place where pigs are prospering, where people are demonized, where Greek religion and paganism and philosophy are flourishing. See, the place of Gad and Reuben, the guys that said, this is a great place for our industry, a great place for our kids. We can take care of our herds here. There's no opposition here. We don't want to go further. We don't want to cross over the Jordan. We don't want to enter into that promised land, that life of abundance. No, we're happy here. We don't want to go in deeper. We're going to retire here. And they fall into herding pigs, demonized people, and paganism. The point is, there's danger at stopping at the border. There's a danger in saying, I don't want to press in. I don't want to commit. I made a commitment to the Lord. I know I'm saved from my sin. I'm good with that. I don't want to press into discipleship. There's too much cost there. I want to focus on my herds, on my land, on my prosperity. There's too much sacrifice crossing over. I'm happy, content where I'm at. I don't want to be committed in my serving, committed in my giving, committed in my church attending. I am happy where I'm at. It's easy this way. It's easy to watch church from home on YouTube in my pajamas with my cup of coffee. And we refuse to press in. But when we do that, problems arise. Verse 33. So Moses gave to them, to the sons of Gad and the sons of Reuben, to the half tribe of Joseph's son Manasseh, the kingdom of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and kingdom of Og, the king of Bashan, the land with its cities, with their territories, the cities of the surrounding land. All of a sudden, it's not just Reuben and Gad, but now they've kind of sucked in the half tribe of Manasseh. See that? Their compromise led others to compromise. They sucked others in. It's not just about you. You'll discourage others. Others are watching you, looking to you, following you. We're a body. There's linkage. There's responsibility we have with one another. We impact each other. How sad it is when we see this happen. I don't see him or her pressing in. They've been Christians longer than I have, and I'm just following their example. So let me ask you, if every Christian was just like you, just as committed as you, read their Bible as much as you, prayed as much as you, served as much as you, gave as much as you, where would the church be? So Gad and Reuben are not wanting to press on. Manasseh is sucked in as well. So they go in, as the story goes on to say, and they help the children of Israel take the land. As soon as the land was conquered, Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh returned home. And in Joshua 22, we read how Reuben and Gad set up their altars near the Jordan River. They set up altars. There was one altar. There was one temple. But all of a sudden, they're building their own altars on the other side of the Jordan. And the other tribes say, what are you doing? You're supposed to come to the tabernacle to worship the Lord. And they almost go to war. When Reuben and Gad say, wait, you don't understand. We don't build this altar. We're not going to offer sacrifices on this altar. No. This is to remind us, to link us to you. It's a symbol merely. So if one day your ancestors forget who we are, we can show them this altar and they'll know that we're linked. So war was averted. But then later on in 1 Chronicles 5:21, we read that when Tiglath-Pileser and the Assyrians come down to conquer Israel, who is the first to be taken captive? But Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Because they were living on the fringes, refusing to press in and go forward, their children ended up enslaved and dead. Mom, Dad, your kids need to see you engaging. Need to see you taking new territory, spiritually speaking. Pressing forward in your maturity, in your relationship with the Lord. Well, Sundays we spend it as a family. You know, I'm devoted to my family. But they don't see you pressing, and you don't think that's going to affect them? They need to see you pressing forward, making God and your relationship with Him a priority. Well, around 100 BC, When the Greeks moved in and settled in the land of Gadara, 90% of the Greek cities in the area, we see the Gentiles moved in. And what had been Jewish cities, these cities in Gadara, now became Gentile ones. And the Jews living in the land saw an opportunity to make money. They saw that these Gentiles liked pork. They liked their bacon in the morning. They liked their pork chops for the dinner. So they traded their cattle, their sheep in for pigs. These Jewish people shepherding and selling unclean animals. It was a mess. Why? Because they refused to press forward. They were happy hanging out on the fringes. They were happy with minimal commitment. They were happy living on the border, thinking, I can enjoy the best of both worlds. But all it did was lead them to be taken over, sucked up, compromised, enslaved, and eventually destroyed. How about you? Have you settled for living on the fringes? Are you happy with minimal commitment? Going to church on Sunday, but Monday through Saturday is my days. I'll open the Bible, I'll pray when the Lord's Day comes around. Are you happy living on the fringes? God has so much in store for you. He says, I want you to have life and have it abundantly. Not sparingly, but abundantly. But you got to press in. You have to push forward. You have to lay claim to the land. And yes, there's opposition. It's not a cakewalk. But it's a land that flows with milk and honey. Abundant in blessing. You got to press forward. But I have cattle to attend to. I have sheep I got to care for. It's better for me to be over here on this side and not completely invested, not completely given. When I get older, I'll worry about that. The interesting thing is, in Mark 5, there's no more cattle over there. There's only pigs. There's only pigs. And that's what happens to us. So much potential, such a great calling, but we refuse to go forward, and it's all just unclean afterwards. Gang, we're either pressing forward or we're going back. There's no middle ground. I like to say that life is a lot like a locomotive. You know, those old time trains where you'd had to stoke the fire, shovel in the coal, get the fire burning hot, the pressure building up so those wheels are turning. Now, there comes a time when I stop feeding the fire, and you know what? The fire will continue to burn. The wheels will continue to turn. I will continue to go forward. The passengers in the car will still be sipping their tea. But slowly, imperceptibly, it will begin to slow down. And you might not notice it until it finally stops 15 miles down the road. And we say, what happened? Well, it started 15 years ago when I stopped stoking the fire. When you said, I got enough, church, enough understanding, enough of that. I don't need to stoke the fire anymore. But suddenly you find yourself at a dead stop. And we say, what happened to the passion? What happened to the dream? What happened to the drive? What happened to my kids? It's because I settled in Gadara. So what's your point, Pastor Greg? My point is, I plead with you. Press in. Go on. Move forward. Don't stop. Don't be content living on the fringes. It's a dangerous place to be. It's a dangerous place to live on the fringes. Press in. Move forward. Lay claim to all the spiritual blessings the Lord has for you. I want to encourage you to go home and read Psalm 84. A great psalm. A great psalm written by King David. And in verse 10 he says, for a day in your courts, he's talking to God, for a day in your courts is better than 1,000 outside. I would rather stand at the threshold of the house of my God than dwell in the tents of wickedness. This is King David. King David, whose name was exalted, whose kingdom was established, whose wealth was incalculable. But he says, you know what? All this stuff that I have gained, all this stuff, it's nothing in comparison. It's nothing in comparison than being close to the Lord. And in the psalm he says he's jealous of the sparrows, how they can continually be close to the presence of the Lord. But the problem is most of us don't believe that's true. We're happy with our palaces. We're happy with the things around us. Thinking those things are going to make us ultimately happy, but David discovered it's not so. He would prefer, he says, to be a doorkeeper in the temple than to have all these riches and abundance. Let us press in. Let's move forward. Let's lay claim to all the blessings the Lord promises to you and to me. Ephesians chapter 1 is filled with them. The spiritual blessings in Christ Jesus. Read through it this week. He says, these are all the things I have in store for you to enjoy. But you got to press in. You got to move forward. You got to possess your possession. And Father, that is our prayer as individuals, as a church, as a community. That we would not be satisfied camping out on the fringes, living on the borders, hanging out on the edge, minimally committed, but that we would all press in and move forward and every day seek to draw closer to you, to know you better, to allow your Spirit to show us areas in our lives where perhaps we're not fully committed so that we can turn those over to you. That we would not cease to stoke the fire, but we would be passionate about going forward. So, Father, we pray that you awaken a holy discontentment in each of us. And that we would not make the mistake of Gad, but we would obey your command and press in. This we pray in Jesus' name. Let's stand.